Hi there, everyone. I'm sorry to keep you waiting. A lot of folks wanted to chat after my speech. I'll just make some brief opening remarks and then take your questions. Happy to be joined here by Minister of Labour and Immigration, Tyler Shandro, and Associate Minister for Labour and Immigration, Mohamed Yassin, as we wrap up the Premier Summit for Newcomers, the first of what we hope will be an ongoing tradition, which is the province bringing together all of the key players to ensure success for immigrants, because that means a successful economy. As I said in my speech, with Alberta's amazing economic recovery and the huge diversification happening across our province, we are going to be facing very serious skill and labour shortages. We think that will be the main thing holding back our economy in future years. We're determined to get more than our share of newcomers using the Alberta Alberta Advantage immigration program, the new streams that we're rolling out. Today, very excited to announce with Minister Shandro the Rural Renewal immigration stream and the Rural Entrepreneur stream that will help rural communities that are struggling to increase their population. It will give them a very powerful tool to be identified as a host community. And we'll work with them to help to connect entrepreneurs with businesses, to start new businesses, and to fill unfilled jobs. I believe that a rising tide lifts all boats, and that newcomers don't take jobs away from Albertans, they help to create jobs. They create additional demand, they create additional wealth, and very typically they create additional businesses that hire people. Newcomers are twice as likely as those of us born in Canada to start a new business. That's the entrepreneurial, risk-taking work ethic that is so deeply Alberta. So very happy with the progress that happened here today, and look forward to making progress on these issues, and we are happy to take your questions.
Just going to start with questions in the room today. As you see, there's a microphone at the front. Please limit yourself to one question and one follow-up. And prior to asking your question, please identify yourself and the outlet you're with. Go ahead.
Hi, Premier. This is Jason Herring at the Calgary Herald. The opposition NDP are calling on you to eject MLA Shane Getson from your caucus over a social media post. That post appears to encourage law enforcement to disobey orders that they receive related to ongoing convoy protests. I'm looking for your reaction to that.
I'm sorry, I haven't seen that, so I can't comment on it.
Okay, I would like to ask a question on behalf of one of my colleagues. This is closer to the health, but we haven't been able to get a response. I'm wondering if you can tell us a bit about Deputy Chief Medical Officers of Health and kind of what role they have, particularly when Dr. Hinshaw isn't working, and maybe why we don't hear from them at these press conferences, and we're going to be hearing from Health Minister Jason Copping coming up here.
Well, first of all, I gather you're telling me that Dr. Hinshaw is taking some personal time. If so, I'm really happy to hear that. Our Chief Medical Officer has been putting in 100-hour weeks for 2 years, and I think she only had one brief break. A couple of times when she tried to get away, she had to come right back to work. So, Dr. Hinshaw has done amazing work helping to provide critical advice and leadership in a very balanced and thoughtful way over the past 2 years, and if she's finally able to take a bit of personal time, I think that's fantastic. And you don't want to burn out people in a key leadership role like that, for sure. A Deputy Chief Medical Officer is a position that I believe is outlined in the statute. It is. It's outlined in the Public Health Act, and of course they act in the capacity when the CMO is unavailable. I would say that the minister, ultimately the CMO reports to the minister, and ultimately the minister is responsible for decisions that are taken. So I don't see the fact that the Minister Copping will be doing news conferences as anything but completely normal. And ultimately the buck stops with the elected government. I don't know what the situation is with respect to news conferences in the Deputy CMO. I'd be happy to look into that, but I think this arrangement is pretty typical. Actually, I've got the former Minister of Health here who knows more about it than I do. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I'm not, I Actually, now that I say that, I'm not entirely sure if it is actually in the act, but it is a ministerial order that is signed by the Minister of Health for the Deputy Chief.
Thanks, Ty. Other questions? Yes?
Hi, Premier. This is Dharampreet with the Red FM radio. So earlier you mentioned that while you were planning these programs, you faced some criticism. If you could tell the viewers about that criticism.
Yeah. In March of 2019, I announced the United Conservative Party's immigration platform for that election, including the two rural immigration programs that we've launched here today, and the Fairness for Newcomers Action Plan. I was surprised and a little disappointed to hear a lot of negative commentary. I think much of it was generated by rebel media, who ran a number of stories suggesting that our goal was to take jobs away from unemployed Albertans, which of course was completely untrue. And then I seem to recall a rebel media journalist, rebel media employee, Keenan Bexty at the time, went out to, I think, Strathmore and interviewed a couple of people claiming that new Canadians working at the Brooks meatpacking plant had been responsible for high levels of crime and social disorder, neither of which things are true. Brooks did have, as I mentioned in my speech today, they did have some real challenges. I think anybody out there would honestly admit that there were early challenges with respect to racism. As well, there were some early challenges with the changing population, where a couple of criminal organizations tried to get involved, but all of those have been long since resolved. And you can talk to the leadership of the Brooks community, where they, I think, have really become a model for successful integration, and that I think, by and large, the community out there has embraced the folks who have revitalized the community, and vice versa. So I was a little concerned back in 2019 when I heard these, I think, xenophobic voices being directed to that situation. I believe the vast majority of Albertans and rural Albertans welcome newcomers, understand how hard they work to contribute to our society, how eager they are to become great Albertans and Canadians. And I want to celebrate the welcoming spirit. I didn't want to put too much emphasis on a small number of negative voices.
Just a quick follow-up that will there be any another announcements related to the immigration after the summit and before the next summit?
Well, Tyler.
Great question. They're going to be, sorry, I should have used this last time. Great question. No, we anticipate many announcements in the next year before the next the summit. There'll be some that rise out of everything we're learning from this summit as well. More ways for us to learn on how we better support newcomers in our communities, but also more ways in which we can improve our streams in the Alberta Advantage immigration program. Thank you.
But I would say, Tyler, that most of what we committed to in the platform has now, as of today, been rolled out. Yeah, now it's improving and tweaking things, right?
Go ahead.
Hi, Mr. Premier. My name is Annie. I'm from the Epoch Times. I have a question related with culture. I find many of the parents from Eastern society, they find confused and, sometimes uncomfortable with the school's teaching to the child. For example, some topic like gender and, family and even, too much and too early, we think, about the sexual things. So we think, we feel uncomfortable about that, and maybe it's modern, but for the, I think maybe the provincial education system can consider about more respect about the traditional value.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. So one of the reasons that we paused the NDP's proposed draft kindergarten to grade 6 curriculum is because we heard from many parents who were concerned about content that might not be age appropriate. And so in our current draft K-6 curriculum, there is a physical education curriculum within it, which I think is very sensitive to those concerns, which ensures that kids learn about their bodies. They also learn about consent. We introduced that early in the elementary schools so that children know that it's wrong for others to exploit them in any way. So we're empowering children with the knowledge about the importance of consent, but it's also a very carefully age-appropriate curriculum. And it will be going into the schools for piloting in 2020, in this September, and we'll monitor that and take more feedback from parents. But certainly we want to ensure that there is no curriculum content which introduces age-inappropriate content on issues like, for example, sexuality.
Thank you.
Thank you, Annie.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Premier.
Hey, good to see you.
Nice to see you again. So 2 questions made from Chinese culture, multicultural newspaper and the Immigrant Education Society. It's today the focus, and one term makes everyone immigrant organizations excited, is that fairness to newcomer action plan. And is that okay? And any of you ministers give us more detailed, about this action plan, and for which we have been waiting since 2019. And also, how will, like today, right? It's so great to say, the forum not only focus on license,
Sure.
and you brings up, this forum is so wonderfully planned, and it brings up, employers, business partners, local communities, and economic whatsoever, like job creators.
Yeah.
Will this be a long-term driven action plan, or we don't want it to be only once a year happen during this forum?
Thank you, May. So, very good questions. The summit is not the action plan. The summit is part of the action plan. I'm going to ask Mr. Dow or Danielle from my office to make sure that May gets all the materials that outline the detailed elements of the action plan for fairness for newcomers. Holding the summit was one part of it. Passing the Fair Registration Practices Act was also part of it. That was done in 2019. That gives the regulators of the professions the direction to give a fair, fast process to recognize foreign credentials and skills. We also created the Fairness for Newcomers Office, which in Minister Chandro's department, which monitors implementation of that law and also evaluates efforts by the regulators to provide a fair process. We have also created a Government of Alberta mentorship program that provides some funding to community groups, nonprofit community groups, that pair 6 people with experience with new immigrants to help them navigate the workforce, help them find jobs, help them to understand kind of the cultural, what we call soft social skills that are often one of the barriers to immigrants. We also have in the action plan funding for what we call micro credit, small loans being delivered by nonprofit organizations to help immigrants pay for certification exams, skills upgrading, because sometimes they have to take time off their often survival jobs to pay for those things in order to get their credentials recognized. What am I missing in the action plan? I think those are the key elements, and we'll get you all of the products on that.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. You mentioned some during your speech just now, and thank you so much. You do know us. Yeah, overall speaking, so for immigrants, right, we want our success not only from the moments we're landing here, it's all about settlement, career, family success or whatsoever. And also, well, joining this forum, talking with so many, stakeholders and immigrant services agencies, and for immigrant, it's not only about jobs and careers, and a fair concept good enough now for us is, diversity and inclusion and respect in the workplace, right? For example, likely, as the lady just mentioned in the school curriculum, like is it possible, will Alberta consider about, or like putting, multicultural, diverse, historic back from our like Chinese history or
Yes.
Indian history whatsoever into the curriculum,
Yeah.
like in a way that with a good consultation
Yes.
with immigrants,
Sure.
like minister, our
Yes,
minister of multiculturalism, right?
Yeah, thank you, mate.
Yeah.
Yeah, the answer is yes, a very strong yes. We published the initial draft social studies curriculum for kindergarten to grade 6 about 11 months ago, March of last year, I think. And we have done widespread consultation, made a number of revisions, of changes to the draft social studies curriculum, which now includes far more content on world civilizations like a Chinese civilization than ever before. One of the things that our critics attacked us for was that I think in the early grades, grade 2, we were introducing some content on the Silk Road that led from Europe to China 1,000 years ago. And we were trying to introduce, for the first time ever, early content about the ties between European and Chinese civilizations. So there have been revisions, and we've also delayed full implementation of the social studies draft curriculum until 2023, September of 2023, because we want to take more time to consult with parents, school boards, teachers, and subject matter experts. But bottom line is this: the social studies curriculum will have far more content in the future than ever before on different civilizations like Chinese civilization, the South Asian, Indian civilization, Middle East, and so this is a global perspective that we are presenting.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks, May.
Thank you, Premier Sam Namora from the Alberta in Arabic. I think you're the only person in Canada who served the country as an immigration minister, a federal immigration minister, and also a premier.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's true.
And the way I heard your speech, and I was really amazed and shocked by all the details you mentioned. So literally, you know every problems out there that we face as an immigrant. So the question to you is, especially with the wind in Alberta is drifting left, right, and center, and maybe there's a change might happen, who knows what. How and what is the guarantee for us as an immigrant that this new strategy with fairness to newcomers is going to be in place for,
Well, there is no
regardless of Jason Kennedy?
Thank you. That's a good question, and I'm going to take it as an opportunity to make a point that I normally wouldn't. But this is the first government in Alberta history to get really serious about immigration and integration policy. In the last 2 elections, I believe that I'd stand to be corrected, but I don't believe there was a single sentence about immigration in the NDP party platform. In the 4 years that Ms. Notley was premier, I don't believe she spoke to or did anything about the issue around credential recognitions and economic integration of newcomers. And so I think they were completely blinded about the issues that I talked about today and that we are acting on. I hope this is not just talk. You can tell I'm passionate about this, but we're putting real resources and real policy effort behind this effort. It's not going to be perfect, okay? There's always going to be barriers, and there's always going to be some newcomers that fall between the cracks, sadly. But we can do a hell of a lot better than we are. And that's what we are determined to do as a government. I told Tyler when I appointed him Minister of Labour and Immigration that he had the best job in the cabinet. I told him I wished I had his job, and I think I still do. How about you come over here and deal with COVID? So my point is the NDP has never shown any practical interest in these issues. And this is one of my top personal priorities. It's one of the things that gets me out of bed in the morning as Premier.
Thank you, Premier.
Thank you.
Thank you, Premier Jason Kenney, and this is a very good Premier Summit on fairness for newcomers. I'm Violet Obarnachea from Pinoy TV, and my question is, like if newcomers that will be coming here, like they are entrepreneurs from the Philippines, can they put up business easily?
Yes, in principle, yes, and I'll let Tyler fill in the details on the entrepreneur programs.
Oh, the entrepreneur program. Sorry, I may have misunderstood, but then if that's the question? Yeah, the criteria are really just for the entrepreneur to have the opportunity to start a new business or buy a new business that's creating only one new job that's not a family member. So we're really looking for just anyone who is a job creator to come to those communities and start those new businesses. Great opportunity to have this new stream, to have those new opportunities for folks to have an accelerated path to being able to come and start a new business very quickly in our province. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Red Barnachea from Radio Pinoy and Pinoy TV, and also from Red FM Filipino Edition. I heard lots of programs that was mentioned a while ago this morning, and one of which was the microloan. It was mentioned 3 times on this program. Now, my question, probably for Minister Tyler Shandro, we want to know a few details of these microloans, please.
Well, thank you. And we've had, we're building on what was previously provided by Windmill, but we're also partnering with the Breeden Center and Service Credit Union, because Service Credit Union already has those opportunities in our smaller urban centers to be able to have that access and have that infrastructure to provide those microloans. Windmill as well, we extended them for another year. So great opportunities then for these microloans, because a lot of times the barrier for a professional who's bringing their skills and experience to Alberta from an international sense, to be able to get that accreditation is sometimes difficult for them financially. So providing those microloans so they can finance getting their accreditation here in Canada. Meanwhile, also with our commitment through the Fair Registration Practices Act and the Labour Mobility Act to help folks make sure it's a quicker process too, so it's not as long.
So how long will it take to be approved?
I'll fill in. So just a little more information, because this starts with my time as the federal immigration minister. There was an organization started in Calgary called the Alberta Immigrant Access Fund. And some wealthy business people acting charitably put some money into this to provide loan guarantees. And the Immigrant Access Fund then welcomed applications from newcomers who needed small loans to pay for additional courses, diplomas, degrees, skills upgrading, but also to pay for their certification exams. As you know, for some of them they would have to take time off work to go and do additional courses in Alberta, and that was an income loss as well. So the microloan idea from the Alberta Immigrant Access Fund was to give them that little bit of financing at very low or no interest rate, and the Access Fund did the processing, made sure that these people were acting in good faith, and then with the backstop of the loan guarantee, they were able to get preferential interest rates from a number of financial institutions. So that organization, the Alberta Immigrant Access Fund, I actually introduced them to some philanthropists, some business people in Toronto. And they said, this is such a great program. It's helping many, many people. It has a 98% repayment rate. It's fantastic. We want to make this national. So the Alberta Immigrant Access Fund became Windmill, it's just called Windmill Microcredit. And then we decided to provide Alberta, because I was giving federal funds to the Alberta Immigrant Access Fund. Now Alberta is providing money to Windmill loans. They do the administrative work, and then they help people to access very low or no interest loans to support skills upgrading and certification. And Tyler's mentioned there's 2 other groups. Yes, Service Credit Union and Breven, who gave a presentation today. So I think it would be great if the ethnocultural media could promote these programs that exist. How long does it take? You'd have to ask them, but I think they're pretty quick moving. I think it's a matter of weeks. These are not operating like big banks. They move pretty quick.
And did you have a follow-up? Oh, no? Perfect. So,
for sure.
Who will be the person to be qualified for this microloan? That's the last question. Thank you.
Well, I think you'd have to check with each of those 3 service providers that we work with. But generally, I think anybody that's a Canadian permanent resident or citizen who requires the financing for skills upgrading or certification, obviously they'll do a credit check. But part of the problem immigrants have is when they just arrive here, they don't have a Canadian credit check. So they can't get easy credit. And so that's why this organization exists. And it's basically a good faith undertaking. It's a promise that people make. They're not giving down any collateral. They're not mortgaging their homes for this money. They're just saying, look, I need $5,000 to take a couple of courses, to pay for my certification exams, promise to pay it back. Here's my plan. They share that with the organization, and they have a very high rate of approvals, and at least the last I heard, a 98% repayment rate.
So I think I see three more folks in line waiting to ask a queue.
But we have to do a better. I think the point here is we have to do a better job of informing people about this stuff.
But the microloan?
Yeah.
I was wondering, maybe Joe, if you don't mind connecting and providing that further information.
Thank you.
So we're going to get to everybody in line here today, but that's only going to leave us time for a couple of calls. But we will get to the phones just after this. Thanks. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. One of my colleagues already asked my question, but I have another question.
Please.
As you said, this is very important, this kind of conference for everyone and especially for newcomers. And you said also this will be annual every year. My question is, some of the newcomers, they have successful history or successful information, but they don't have much information about this kind of conference. They need where to share their stories.
Yeah.
And sharing their stories is very good for the government of Alberta.
100%.
So what is the easiest way newcomers can get information about this kind of conference?
We have a website for the, if you just Google Alberta Advantage Immigration Strategy or Fairness for Newcomers Office, if you just Google one of these phrases, you'll get to the website that provides all the information about the programs and services that are available. But you just mentioned the whole reason why I wanted the summit. I wanted the summit in large part to allow immigrants who have been struggling to work at their skill level, to speak directly to the leaders of the government, the leaders of the business community, and the leaders of the professional regulators. And that's something unique that we can do, because the 72 regulators of trades and professions are all created by the Alberta legislature. They're all self-governing, but ultimately, we give them their power. Ultimately, they're accountable. They're accountable to us to ensure that they are acting in the public interest. So you didn't see them all in the room today, but there were dozens of senior leaders of the credentialing agencies, the regulators, who were either there or following the conference online. Next year, we'll do this again. We'll do this annually, and I hope to make that a bigger part of it. I'd like to, in person, get the heads of all of those 70-plus regulators in the room listening to the practical barriers that people experience. Look, in the past, I think there was some unfair conduct by some of the regulators doing what we call gatekeeping, trying to protect their closed, certified labor market from more competition. Because every additional person that gets certified in a profession is competing for business. right, with the other professionals. And I do think in the past that some of the barriers were not fair or justifiable, but they were established to limit the number of new people coming into those professions. Now, I think that is less and less the case. More and more of the regulators are getting with the program. We brought in this law. We are monitoring their progress. But this conference is a way to really get their attention. And that's why we'll do it every year.
My final question. This conference is going to be held in Calgary every year, or are you planning to come to Edmonton?
You know, how about this? I'll make an announcement today. The next one will be in Edmonton. I think we need to get around the province. and then maybe Red Deer. All right.
Go ahead with your question.
Make sure your officials heard me on that, all right?
Hi, Mr. Premier. It's good to see you again. My name is Joanna from Life Calgary.
Life Calgary?
Life Calgary.
Good to see you, Joanna.
Yeah, good to see you. So in your keynote presentation, you mentioned that we're short of skilled talents. And so I would like to ask the question that do people work in the tech industry? Do they have like an advantage in becoming a Canadian immigrant? And do you see the tech industry, the next booming industry here in Alberta? Thank you.
Sure. Yes, the tech industry is absolutely a booming industry in Alberta. We have seen an explosion of venture capital investment. This is typically going into information technology startups. We have seen major global companies setting up large offices here and major national companies. I mentioned Amazon Web Services, Rogers, Royal Bank of Canada, Infosys, Emphasis, many others. We have seen a huge increase in the number of tech startup businesses. And what the industry is telling us is there is effectively zero unemployment in the information technology sector in Alberta right now, that the only thing holding us back is a lack of people with relevant skills like coding. Now, this is true all around the world. There's a growing skills shortage in information technology, which is why we'll be making some announcements in next week's budget about targeted investments to provide training and courses to help Albertans get those good tech jobs that are coming here. But we also believe that immigration can be a key tool to help address the labor shortages in the tech sector, and I'll let Minister Chandra speak more about that.
Thank you, Premier. And the way that it's happening is, I mean, if I go back to September when I first came into this role, talking to a lot of employers and a lot of tech professionals who were already here and had long process in becoming a tech professional in Alberta, or those who wanted to come to Alberta, that federal streams and provincial streams, in particular the federal stream, Global Talent Stream, was not a very effective way in bringing tech talent to Alberta at all. It actually, Alberta's disadvantaged through the Global Talent Stream. And heard a lot of complaints. And so working with the sector is how we came to what ended up being the criteria for the accelerated tech pathway. It's not a new stream, but within the express entry stream, having that accelerated pathway so that if there's a qualified tech professional, then if they have that job offer, getting them approved to be one of our nominees in 2 weeks. And then if they still need to be able to come here before they end up getting permanent residency from the federal government, giving them a letter of support for them to become a temporary, getting a temporary permit so they can start working here right away. So that's that's the details of one of the ways in which we're working to bring those folks in an accelerated way through that pathway.
I'm just going to add an important point. The tech sector is very fast moving, as you know. They don't have months or years to wait for talent. And one of the key things about the program Tyler just mentioned is that we will be issuing what we call letters of, basically a letter to the Immigration, Refugee and Citizenship Canada, IRCC, nominating people coming into this permanent residency program for a work permit. So they will come. They hopefully will get that work permit in a matter of weeks, and then we can go through the whole processing of the permanent residency application that can take over a year. So we very important that we move quickly And we have that arrangement with IRCC to allow us to nominate people for a fast-track work permit.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Minister Shandro had to step out to provide some remarks, so please excuse his absence. We'll get the last two questions from line here before heading to the phones. Thank you.
Thank you, Premier. My name is Shakil Ahmed, and I am the Pakistani community newspaper called Canadian Times. On behalf of my media colleagues, I would like to say thank you for the government of Alberta, which is the first government in almost 100 years who care about the new immigrants or newcomers. And I would like to recognize the services of Associate Minister Mohammad Yassin as a Associate Minister and the Secretary for Multiculturalism. My question is that there are 72 regulatory bodies, and there are dozens of trades. Down the road, is there any planning for the government that you guys can include the more trades to recognize as a professional or the recognized?
Yes. Yeah, we are open to that, for sure. This is a government that likes cutting regulations. On the other hand, we understand that sometimes having the status of a regulated profession can help. Like, I'll give you an example. The trucking industry has long suggested that it would be helpful for to address their labor shortages if they were a regulated trade. That would also address some of the training issues that have been raised in the past. So we are open to that, and in fact, I think during our time in office, we have passed legislation creating 2 or 3 additional regulated, and also merging some. So we're always willing to work with the. Yeah, do you want to say something about this, Mohammed?
Thank you very much for that question. 72 regulatory bodies were at the time, in 2019, that existed in Alberta at that time. But that doesn't mean that is a full stop there. As we go along, some of them may merge into, 2 may merge into 1, and so on, and there may be also new ones as well. So we are open to include them as we go along.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for answering.
You can go ahead.
Hello, sir. This is Mustafa here from Vision Live Studio. How are you?
Very well, sir.
Okay. Actually, I had too many questions in my mind, but my colleagues, they have already asked you too many questions. My suggestion would be like if you ask your colleague to have a sitting with the local media, ethnic medias, and disclose your ideas, what kind of services you are offering for the new immigrants for the Alberta. So it's going to be very useful, especially for those like Urdu media. If you ask someone to go to the talk to the media person in their own language.
Yes, exactly.
So it's going to be very easy for to others to understand what kind of facilities you are offering for the new immigrants coming to Alberta. So this is my suggestion. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is you're offering too many loans and different facilities for the newcomers. Michael, I had asked the same question to Brother Yassin and Minister Yassin. What you have for the people struggling in this tough time, like a business people and the other who has lost their job, what kind of loans or facilities you're going to offer to them? This is my question.
Thank you, Mustafa Bhai, for this question. Although this Premier Summit on Fairness for Newcomers talks about new immigrants and newcomers largely, but we have done a lot of other things for our economy as a whole. One of the things that we have started is Alberta Jobs Now program. That helps our business owners, NGOs, for-profit and for not-profit, to up to 25% up, or maybe $25,000 if the total cost for that hire is $100,000, 25% will be supported by the provincial government. And in case of a hiree who is special need, that goes to 1.5% of that $25,000 up to $37,000. So this helps businesses to hire new people. Also, we have done a number of other things. We have lower taxes. We have diversified our economy. This is all helpful for our economic recovery, and you can see the signs of economic recovery in this province that are unparalleled anywhere in this country as well as probably in the world. So there's a lot of other things that are happening, and we want to make sure that our newcomers become part of that economic growth. Thank you.
Okay, how about the business people? Like in this pandemic, too many people, they have closed their door because of the pandemic things. Now they would like to stand on their legs again. So is there any plan you have for those people?
Okay, thank you. We've had a number of funding available for our businesses right from the beginning of pandemic. And I think although most of them may have, may no longer be applicable at this point in time because the economy is recovering, but we are open to, if there's a need to, we can look into that as well.
Thank you very much, sir.
Okay.
Thank you. So we're just going to take our last question from the floor before taking 2 calls from the line. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Joanne, and I'm from Connect FM 1017, Awit OPM. And I'm also here to represent a good friend with Mabuhay Calgary. So good afternoon, Premier. Thank you so much for having us here. And congratulations for this wonderful, wonderful, amazing Fairness for Newcomers Summit. And I hope this is not the first, that there'll be more.
You hope it's not the last, yes.
And not like that's why we're looking forward for more to come. But our questions is also would entail to the newcomers, but in conjunction with the temporary foreign workers.
Mm-hmm.
I know we're encouraging a lot of savvy tech people, and I know there's a lot of businesses right now in Alberta that are also struggling because of manpower. There's a lot of job, yes, that's great, but there's also a lot of struggles in terms of retention for their employees. So having said that, with the temporary foreign workers, I know that opened up a huge opportunity for a lot, especially for us from the Philippines, that we're able to.
And I mentioned that in my speech, the folks that came and stayed.
Which is great, yeah. So would there be a pathway that, from this temporary foreign workers that eventually this would lead to also a permanent residency? And
thank you. Well, thank you for being here and your wonderful comments. I'll say that, as you know, the temporary foreign worker program is a federal program. Ultimately, the federal government has the monopoly power to issue work permits and labor market impact assessments, LMIAs. So we have to live within the parameters that the federal government sets. Now, the Alberta Immigrant Nominee Program, which as of today, we're calling the Alberta Advantage Immigration Program, has always had generous pathways to permanent residency for people who are either here on temporary status, either temporary foreign workers, foreign students, et cetera. And in fact, the vast majority of the permanent residents who came through the AINP, the nomination program, originally came here on a temporary permit, right? So now, because we have not been able to bring in immigrants generally from abroad during COVID with travel restrictions, because of that, it means that most of the provincial and federal immigration programs have turned to converting temporary residents into PR over the past 2 years of COVID. And so right now, we have a tiny number, well, let me rephrase that, a very small number, the lowest in probably 15 years of people who are here as TFWs. So, because we've been able to clear through all of the applications for conversion to permanent residency. So there will continue to be pathways to PR available through the provincial program, but more and more we will now be able to turn our attention to recruiting people directly from abroad. So, but the program will still be there for temporary residents if they're qualified, but I anticipate, given the travel restrictions over the past 2 years, more direct immigrants from abroad.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
so much, Premier.
Thank you, Joanne. And with that, we have no more questions from the floor, so we're going to turn it over to the operator. Can you please put through our first caller?
Shailene Skulski, CTV. Hi, thank you so much for taking my question. My question is for the Premier. Premier, with news out today from Statistics Canada regarding inflation continuing to grow at a pace we have not seen in decades, and the budget out, of course, next week, I'm wondering, what can everyday taxpaying Albertans expect in your budget in terms of financial relief?
Well, there will be a rebate for electricity prices over a certain rate. Something Alberta's had in the past. We acknowledge that people are struggling to pay for higher energy costs. One of the big drivers of that is the federal Liberal carbon tax. Our government eliminated the Alberta NDP carbon tax. We then fought the federal carbon tax in court. Unfortunately, we had a narrow loss at the Supreme Court of Canada, and so that federal carbon tax is one of the big cost drivers. So I would renew our call on the federal government to drop their punishing carbon tax. All it does is to make it more expensive to heat your home, to use electricity, and I think this is irresponsible. It's insensitive at a time that Canadians are struggling to cover the costs of inflation, and particularly when it comes to heating and electricity.
Follow-up today?
Yeah, just as a follow-up on that, there are things the provincial government does have control over. For example, the official opposition has called on the province to reintroduce an energy cap rate to help with utility costs, put a cap on insurance rates, as well as lower the amount of personal income tax collected. Are you considering any of these suggestions as ways to provide Albertans some relief right now?
Well, this, that's completely ridiculous coming from the NDP that imposed a carbon tax with the goal of raising the cost of electricity and home heating and filling up your gas tank. So, the NDP, they like higher power prices because they think it forces consumers to turn down the temperature at home and drive less. That's actually for them a feature and not a bug. They like punishing consumers for consuming energy. That's why they are carbon tax fans. We don't like punishing consumers for consuming energy, and that's why we're carbon tax opponents. This government, I'll tell you what, if the NDP was in office, they wouldn't be lowering taxes, they would be raising taxes, as they did. The carbon tax was the largest tax hike in Alberta history, and this government has cut taxes. But the NDP's reckless spending would create permanent deficits and higher taxes, making the cost of living problem even worse. One thing that Ottawa could also do right now to help with inflation, food inflation, is to stop the pointless trucker vaccine mandate, which has reduced the number of truckers bringing groceries up from the States, and that's forced up food inflation as well. So we think we need a common sense approach to this. As I said, we will be addressing the high power prices next week in the budget.
Thank you, Premier. Operator, can you please put through our final call?
Chris Barco, Calgary Herald.
Hi, Premier. Just to follow up on that last question, you referenced a couple of weeks ago that your government was looking at a rebate or higher natural gas prices. I believe that would kick in about $6.50 a gigajoule. Now you just indicated that you're talking about electricity price rebates. I just want to be clear here. Are you looking at two separate rebates, and what would the threshold be for the power price rebate?
Apologies. I thought I said gas a moment ago. If I said electricity, I misspoke. I'm sorry. There will be a rebate program announced in the budget for natural gas over a certain price point. It'll be similar to programs that we've had in Alberta to address very high gas prices. The details will be announced next week, and I'm sorry if I misspoke. I apologize for that.
Follow-up today?
Okay. Just to follow up, yes. Step 2 of the listing of the restrictions regarding health restrictions, I guess set for March the 1st. I'm just wondering, how long will it take for the work from home restrictions to be lifted, and what are you hearing from employers about companies getting their workers back into the offices?
So we do anticipate lifting almost all remaining public health restrictions on March the 1st. We continue to see encouraging downward trends in hospitalizations and other key COVID indicators. And one of the things we'll be lifting we hope to lift on March the 1st will be the work from home order. Of course, people have been able to work if it's essential at their jobs, but this will, I think, result in a very quick return to office work. in the downtown cores and elsewhere. And I think that's great for the downtown cores of Edmonton and Calgary that have been really struggling over the past 2 years on top of everything else. I'm hearing anecdotally from major employers that they will be coming back. They're planning to come back in March. And certainly we, as the government of Alberta, will be doing the same. Our plan is actually, I think like most major private sector office employers, to move forward with a bit more of a hybrid model to allow people who've gotten used to it, if they can be productive, to work from home occasionally. But we do expect people to show up. The idea that you can have a corporate culture and be fully efficient without ever seeing and working directly with your colleagues, I think is unrealistic. So certainly the government of Alberta will be getting people back to those offices in early March, and we expect that's going to happen right across the private sector. And that's great news for all those downtown businesses and vendors who have been struggling for 2 years.
Well, Premier, thanks for letting me throw so many questions your way today. That wraps things up. Have a great day.
Thank you.